The schoolhouse stood alone in the December twilight, like a single warm candle in a world that had gone cold. Fresh snow lay deep over Silver Pine, Wyoming, and the town moved quietly under it, as if the holiday itself had told everyone to speak softer. Inside the little one-room school, Miss Emily Carter worked by lamplight, careful and steady, as if the room mattered as much as a church. She draped pine branches along the windows, their sharp, clean smell cutting through chalk dust and old wood. Every few inches, she tied a red ribbon that looked too bright for such a gray winter. It was her small way of fighting back against the darkness that always came early this time of year. Emily was only 24, but her eyes did not look like a young woman's eyes. They were smart and kind, but they carried a quiet tiredness too, the kind that comes from learning to stand alone. Her dress was simple and neat, with a high collar and careful stitching she had done herself. Nothing about her said rich, yet everything about her said proud. Through the frosted glass, she watched the town hurry by. Mothers called children home, their voices soft in the snow. Men carried wood toward houses glowing with yellow light. Smoke curled from chimneys and mixed with the smell of supper. Laughter slipped out from half-open doors before the cold pulled them shut again. Emily watched a light spill onto the snow and felt the same ache she felt every year. The children loved her. They brought her apples, wildflowers, and little notes drawn in bright crayon. They stayed after class to wipe slates and ask questions that had nothing to do with school. She was important in their lives, but when the day ended, they all ran home to someone else. On her desk sat a drawing from little Lily Harper. It showed Emily with a neat bun and a wide smile, standing in a circle of children holding hands under a big yellow sun. The letters were crooked, but proud. My teacher and my friends. Emily traced the drawing with one finger, and the sweetness of it warmed her while it stung at the same time. She folded it carefully and placed it in her desk drawer with the others. A small pile of love she could not take home. When the room was finished, she lit the oil lamp in the front window, the sign that the school day was truly done. Anyone passing would see the glow and think how cheerful it looked. They would not see that no one was coming to meet her there. She wrapped a thin shawl around her shoulders and stepped outside. The snow crunched under her boots, and the wind carried the smell of wood smoke and distant singing. Christmas music floated through the town like something half-remembered. What Emily did not see was the man sitting on horseback at the edge of the street, still as a fence post. His name was Marcus Thorne, and he was built like the land itself, broad-shouldered and hard from work. His hat sat low, shadowing a face that had not smiled much in 3 years. He watched Emily leave the warm schoolhouse and walk alone into the night, straight-backed and quiet. He had seen her do this before. Not once or twice, but year after year. He knew the town called her kind and proper. He also knew the town never invited her anywhere. Marcus understood loneliness in his bones. His wife, Mary, had died from fever 3 winters ago, and since then his ranch house felt like a big, clean room that no one lived in. He had 2 children, Annie and Ben, and a housekeeper named Mrs. Gable who kept everything running. The meals came on time. The floors stayed swept. The clothes were folded. Yet the air in that house stayed cold, no matter how high the fire burned. Marcus turned his horse toward the road out of town. Behind him, the schoolhouse lamp still shone, a small light meant for nobody. As he rode into the deepening dark, one thought would not leave him alone. Emily brought warmth to everyone else's children every day. Then she went home to nothing. And tomorrow, when the holiday came, she would sit in a rented room listening to other families laugh through thin walls. He told himself it was not his business. He told himself it would look like pity. He told himself he was not ready to bring anyone close again. Then he remembered his daughter Annie's face the last time she asked why the house felt so quiet. He remembered Ben crying in his sleep, calling for his mother in a voice too small for such pain. By the time Marcus reached the edge of town, he had made a decision he had resisted for 3 long years. Some kinds of loneliness were not meant to be carried alone. 2 days later, on the morning of December 22nd, Emily stood at the counter of the general store, counting coins for her small Christmas treat. 1 orange, wrapped carefully in paper, a spool of thread for mending, a tin of tea she saved for special days. The doors swung open and cold air rushed in. Marcus Thorne stepped inside with his children. Ben was first, full of energy, his cheeks red from the cold. Annie followed, older and calmer, with watchful eyes that seemed to notice everything. "Miss Carter?" Ben shouted, running straight to her as if she belonged to him. He grabbed the side of her skirt and held on. "Look, Papa bought peppermints." Emily's face softened before she could stop it. "Hello, Ben. Hello, Annie." Quote. Annie nodded, serious as always, but happy. "We have a tree," she said. "A big one." Marcus took off his hat and walked closer. He looked like a man who had practiced these words in his head 100 times and still did not know how to say them out loud. "Miss Carter," he began, voice low and steady, "I wonder if I could speak with you." The store owner moved away, pretending to organize supplies. The children stood very still, like they were waiting for a signal. Marcus took a breath. "My household would be honored by your presence for Christmas. We will have a proper dinner. The children want to sing. It just seems wrong for the woman who brings Christmas to every child in town to spend the day alone." Emily felt her cheeks heat, surprised and embarrassed all at once, because the truth of her life had been spoken plainly. She almost said no out of pride. Almost. But then Annie stepped forward, her voice quiet and brave. "You taught me to read the hard words," she said. "I want to show you I can do it now." Ben squeezed Emily's skirt tighter. "Please come," he said. "Mrs. Gable makes gingerbread." Emily looked down at their hopeful faces and felt something break inside her, something that had been stiff for years. She thought of her cold rented room. She thought of the long, silent day waiting for her. She lifted her chin and met Marcus's eyes. In his gaze she saw sorrow, yes, but also honesty. He was not offering charity, he was offering a chance. "I would be honored," she said softly. "Thank you." Marcus let out a breath like he had been holding it for a lifetime. "Christmas Eve morning," he said. "I'll come with the wagon at 9. As they left, the children waved at her like she had already said yes to something bigger than a dinner. Emily stood holding her little parcel, and for the first time in years, the air around her did not feel completely empty. She did not know it yet, but the light in that schoolhouse window had finally been seen by the right person. And once Marcus Thorne opened his door, there would be no easy way to close it again. Christmas Eve came with a hard sky and a wind that cut through wool like it was paper. Emily woke before sunrise in her small boarding room above the general store. The town below was already busy, but not with work. It was busy with joy. She could hear laughter, the scrape of boots, the soft jingle of harness bells. Every sound reminded her of what she usually did on this day, which was nothing at all. She washed in cold water, braided her hair neat, and put on her best dress. It was plain but clean, and she pinned a small ribbon at her collar to look more like Christmas. Then she sat on the edge of her bed with her hands folded, listening to her own breathing. She told herself she was only going for dinner. She told herself she would not get attached. She told herself that a warm house for one day could not change a life. At exactly 9, a wagon rolled into the street below. Emily looked out the window and saw Marcus Thorne holding the reins, his shoulders squared against the cold. Annie sat beside him, quiet and watchful. Ben bounced in the back, wrapped in a blanket, waving like he was greeting a parade. Emily took her small carpet bag and walked downstairs. The boarding house hallway smelled like onions and damp wood. Mrs. Dallow watched from the kitchen doorway, her eyes sharp. "Well," the woman said, trying to sound casual, "look at you." Emily kept her voice calm. "Mr. Thorne invited me for Christmas." Mrs. Dallow gave a little sniff, the kind that could mean anything. "That ranch is 5 miles out, a long way to go for supper." Emily did not answer. She stepped outside into the cold, where the snow squeaked under her boots. Ben leaned over the back of the wagon. "Miss Carter, we saved you the best seat," he said, as if it was already decided she belonged there. Marcus climbed down to help her up. He did not touch her more than he had to, but his hand was steady. "Morning," he said. His eyes met hers for a moment, then moved away like he was afraid to stare too long. "Good morning," Emily replied. The wagon started forward, leaving town behind. Silver Pine shrank into a cluster of smoke and roofs and holiday light. The road turned into open country, wide and quiet, with snow stretching toward the horizon. The wind rolled across the plains with nothing to stop it. For a while no one spoke. The silence was not rude. It was the kind that came when people did not know what words were safe. Ben broke it first. "Annie made you something," he said, smiling like it was a secret he could not hold. Annie's cheeks went red. "Ben, hush!" Marcus looked at his daughter. "Let her speak when she wants." Emily watched Annie's face and saw something older than 9 years. It was not just shyness, it was caution. Emily knew that look. It was the look of someone who had learned not to ask for too much. The ranch came into view after they crested a low hill. The house was large and well built, with a wide porch and a tall stone chimney. A barn sat farther back, dark and solid against the white land. Fences cut clean lines through the snow. Everything looked cared for, almost too cared for, like a place kept in order by force of will. As the wagon rolled into the yard, the front door opened. A sturdy woman stepped onto the porch. Her hair was gray and pulled tight, and her face was honest and direct. "That would be Miss Carter," she called, not asking. Marcus nodded. "Yes, Mrs. Gable." Mrs. Gable came down the steps and looked Emily up and down, not unkind, but thorough. "You're thinner than I expected," she said. Then she turned to the children. "You two, wipe your boots. And Ben, do not drag snow all over my floors." Ben groaned but obeyed. Emily stepped down from the wagon, and the cold hit her again. Marcus took her bag without being asked. "Come inside," he said. "It's warmer." The moment Emily walked through the front door, she felt it. The house was warm in temperature, but cold in a different way. The air smelled clean and still. The furniture sat in perfect order. The floors shined. Nothing was out of place. Then she saw the photographs. A woman's face looked back from frames on the wall, on the mantel, on a small table by the stairs. Dark hair, gentle eyes, a smile that seemed to belong to the whole room. There were small touches, too, like a hand-sewn pillow and a stitched sampler above the hearth that read, "Love makes a house a home." Emily's chest tightened. She understood without anyone saying it. This house had not moved forward since Mary Thorne died. It had been held in place like a pinned insect. Ben tugged Emily toward the parlor. "Come see the tree," he said. The tree was tall and real, filling the corner with the smell of pine. It was decorated with paper stars and strings of dried berries. Presents sat beneath it, placed with careful neatness. Annie stood by the tree like a guard, making sure nothing was disturbed. "It's nice," Emily said, and she meant it. "It's Mary's way," Mrs. Gable said from behind her. "Or it was. We do it the same every year." Marcus stepped into the room and stopped when he saw Emily looking at the photographs. His jaw tightened, like he expected her to judge him. Emily chose her words carefully. She must have been loved very much. Marcus did not answer right away. Then he said, quiet and rough, "She was." Mrs. Gable cleared her throat. "Miss Carter, I'll show you the guest room." Emily followed her upstairs. The room was clean, with a thick quilt on the bed and a small lamp on the dresser. And there, on the dresser, was another photograph of Mary, smiling like she had never left. Emily swallowed. "It's a lovely room." Mrs. Gable leaned closer, lowering her voice. "The children have missed having a woman in the house, a real one, not a housekeeper. Mind you, I'm not begging you to fix anyone. I'm only telling you the truth." Emily's heart beat faster. "I'm just here for Christmas." Mrs. Gable gave a short nod, like she had heard that line before. "We'll see." When Emily went back downstairs, she found Annie in the kitchen, standing near the table like she did not know what to do with her hands. Ben was already sniffing around the oven, hoping for treats. Emily rolled up her sleeves. "Do you need help, Mrs. Gable?" Mrs. Gable looked at her for a long moment, then pushed a bowl across the table. "If you know how to mix dough without making a mess, you can help." Emily smiled softly. "I can manage." Soon the kitchen filled with the smell of flour and butter. Ben laughed when Emily dusted his nose by accident. Annie watched closely, then slowly stepped in, measuring sugar with careful hands. Marcus stood in the doorway, silent. He watched his children laugh like he was seeing it for the first time in years. Then his eyes moved to Emily, and his expression changed. It was not gratitude, it was fear. Emily felt it too. The way the room began to feel less like a shrine and more like a home. It should have been a good thing. Yet the tightness in Marcus's face said he did not know how to handle good things anymore. That night, after supper, Emily stood by the front window and looked out at the snow-covered yard. The ranch was quiet under the stars. Behind her, she heard the soft sound of Annie turning pages of a book and Ben humming a Christmas tune he barely knew. Marcus stepped up beside her, not close enough to touch, but close enough to be felt. His voice came low. "Miss Carter," he said, "there's something I need to talk to you about." Emily turned to him, and the seriousness in his eyes made her stomach drop. It suddenly did not feel like she was only here for supper anymore. Marcus led Emily down the hall to a small room he called his study. It smelled like leather, lamp oil, and cold air that had settled into the cracks of the walls. A heavy desk sat near the window. Papers were stacked in neat piles, like order was the only thing holding the house together. He shut the door, not to trap her, but to keep the children from hearing. His hands stayed on his hat, twisting the brim like he was trying to shape the right words out of it. "I invited you here for Christmas," he said, "but that is not the whole truth." Emily stood straight, her fingers clasped in front of her. "All right." Marcus looked at her, and the tightness in his face returned. "I have watched you for years. You leave that schoolhouse alone every day. You fix it up like it matters, like someone is coming back for you." Emily's throat tightened, but she did not look away. "It does matter. The children deserve a place that feels warm." "And what about you?" he asked, the words coming out sharper than he meant. He softened his voice. "What do you deserve, Miss Carter?" Quote. Emily swallowed. "I'm not sure anyone has asked me that before." Marcus drew a slow breath. "Mary asked me to promise her something the week she knew she was dying. She asked me to keep this house from turning into a cold place for our children. She asked me to make sure Annie and Ben would be raised with care, not just fed and clothed." Emily listened, her eyes steady. Behind Marcus's strong shoulders, she could see how tired he truly was. "I tried," he said. "I worked. I kept the ranch going. I hired Mrs. Gable. I did what a man can do." His jaw tightened, "but I did not know how to give them what you give them without even trying." Emily's heart beat harder. "I'm their teacher." "That is part of it," Marcus said, "but it's more than lessons. You look at them. You speak to them like they matter. You sit down with them and make a plain room feel like a home." His voice dropped. "When I saw Ben grab your hand, it scared me, not because it was wrong, because it felt right." Emily's cheeks warmed. "Mr. Thorne, I am not here to take anyone's place." Quote. "I'm not asking you to," he said quickly. Then he paused, and his next words came out slow and careful. "I'm asking you to consider something. Not tonight, but soon." Emily's fingers tightened. "What?" Marcus stepped to the desk and opened a drawer. He pulled out a paper and set it down like it was heavy. "Mrs. Gable is 65, he said. "She's strong, but she's tired. She won't say it, but I can see it. I can't run the ranch and keep this house from falling apart at the same time." He met Emily's eyes. "I want you to live here, not as a guest, as part of this household." Emily stared at him. The room felt suddenly smaller. "You mean as a hired helper," she said, trying to keep her voice even. "I mean as our teacher," he answered. For Annie. For Ben. School starts again in 2 weeks. I could send them into town every day, but storms come hard out here. I could hire a tutor from Cheyenne, but they don't know my children. You do." He swallowed. "And I want them here, safe. I want them to grow up where their mother wanted them." Quote, Emily felt a strange mix of relief and fear. A warm bed, a real table, a place that did not feel temporary, but also the town's eyes, the whispers. The way people turned kindness into gossip. She lifted her chin. "People will talk." Marcus gave a short nod. "They already do. They say I'm cold. They say my house is a tomb. They say you're alone." His voice sharpened again. "Let them talk. I'm done letting other people decide how my children live." Emily's breath caught at the word children. Not his grief, not his pride. His children. That was what drove every choice. "And what would I be here?" she asked. "To you?" Marcus's eyes flickered, like he saw a cliff edge he did not want to step off. "You would be the one who keeps this house alive," he said. "You would have a room, fair pay, and respect. The children would answer to you in the house. Mrs. Gable would answer to you too if she's wise." Emily blinked. "You would give me that kind of authority?" "I would," he said, "because I've watched you. You don't take more than you're given. You earn it." Quote. Emily looked down at the paper on the desk. It was a simple agreement, written in careful words. It offered more money than she had ever made. It offered a home. It also offered something she had never allowed herself to want. She stepped back, her voice quiet. "This is a lot to ask of someone." "It's a lot to ask of me too," Marcus said. "I'm not good at letting people close. Mary was the only one who ever got past my walls. And when I lost her, I built them higher." He rubbed a hand over his face. "But I'm tired of living like this." Emily's eyes stung, but she held steady. "I need time." Marcus nodded. "You can have time." They walked back into the parlor, where Ben was on the rug lining up toy soldiers and Annie was reading by the fire. When the children saw Emily, their faces brightened like she was part of the room now. "Miss Carter," Ben called, "Mrs. Gable said we can hang stockings." Emily's lips curved into a soft smile. "Then, we should do it right." They hung the stockings on the mantel, one by one. Annie's was neat and plain. Ben's had a patched corner where he had ripped it last year and Mary had fixed it. Emily's hands paused when she saw the stitches, because they were small and careful, made by someone who had loved that boy with her whole heart. Mrs. Gable brought out a small tin of peppermint sticks and dropped one into each stocking. "For the smell," she said. Annie watched Emily closely, then reached into her pocket and pulled out a folded scrap of paper. "I made this," Annie said, her voice low like she was scared of being laughed at. Emily opened it. Inside was a tiny drawing of the ranch house, with 4 stick figures standing in front. One was taller, with a hat. 2 were small. The 4th had long hair. Emily's throat tightened. "This is lovely, Annie." Annie's eyes stayed on Emily's face. "Do you think you might stay here?" she asked quietly, "after Christmas?" Emily looked at the child and saw the hope in her, the hope she tried so hard to hide. Ben stopped playing and looked up too, as if he had been listening the whole time. Emily crouched down so she was closer to them. "I haven't decided yet," she said gently, "but I promise you this. I will not decide without thinking about what is best for you." Ben crawled closer and pressed his head against her arm. "Best is you," he mumbled. Emily's eyes filled, and she blinked fast to keep the tears from falling. That night, after the children went to bed, Emily went upstairs to her room. She sat on the edge of the quilt and stared at her hands. A part of her wanted to run back to her quiet little room in town where no one expected anything from her. Another part of her wanted to stay right where she was, because for the first time in years, she did not feel invisible. She heard boots on the stairs. A moment later, there was a knock at her door. Emily opened it and found Mrs. Gable standing there with a lamp in one hand and a sealed letter in the other. Her face looked harder than usual. "This came by Ryder," Mrs. Gable said. "It's for Marcus, and it's trouble." Emily's stomach dropped. "What kind of trouble?" Mrs. Gable held the letter out, her eyes sharp with worry, the kind that takes children away from a house that's already breaking. Emily stood in the hallway with the lamplight shaking on the walls, and Mrs. Gable held the sealed letter like it was a snake. The older woman's mouth was set tight, the way it got when she was holding back anger. Marcus came up the stairs a moment later, drawn by the voices. He stopped when he saw the letter and the look on Mrs. Gable's face. "Who brought it?" he asked. "A rider from town," Mrs. Gable said. "He left quick, like he did not want to be seen." Marcus took the envelope and turned it over once. There was a lawyer's mark stamped in the corner. His thumb paused on the seal, then he broke it and unfolded the paper. Emily watched his eyes move across the lines. At first, his face stayed still. Then color drained from him, leaving him pale and hard. Mrs. Gable leaned closer. "Say it." Marcus swallowed once. "It's from Cheyenne," he said. His voice sounded like gravel. "From a lawyer named Walter Pierce." Emily's stomach tightened. "What does it say?" Quote, Marcus's eyes flicked to her, then away, as if he hated that she had to hear it. "It says Mary's sister has filed a claim for the children." Mrs. Gable made a sharp sound. "Helen Bennett." Marcus nodded once, like the name tasted bitter. "She says the house is not fit. She says the children are being raised without proper care. She says I have been gone too much. She says I have turned the place into a tomb." Emily felt cold spread through her chest. "Can she do that?" "She can try," Marcus said. "And she has money." Mrs. Gable stepped forward, hands on her hips. "Helen never came once when Mary was dying. Not once. Now she wants the children." Marcus stared at the paper like it might burn a hole through his hand. "The letter says there will be a hearing in the county court in 10 days. They want me to appear. They want Annie and Ben brought in too." Emily pictured Annie's serious face, Ben's small hands clinging, the way both children watched the world like it could leave them again at any moment. The thought of strangers taking them away made her throat close. "She wants them," Emily said softly, "because she thinks she can." Marcus's jaw worked, like he was holding back words that could break something. "She wants them," he said, "because she thinks I do not deserve them." Mrs. Gable snatched the letter and scanned it, her lips moving. "She is also saying you have no wife, no mother in the home." Her eyes snapped up to Marcus. "She is using that." Marcus's gaze flicked toward Emily, then down. His shoulders tightened like he was bracing for a blow. Emily felt her cheeks warm, not from shame, but from anger. "So she thinks a woman is only useful as proof." Mrs. Gable gave a hard nod. "That is how folks talk. That is how courts listen." From down the hall, a floorboard creaked. All three of them turned. Annie stood on the stairs in her nightgown, hair loose, her face pale in the lamplight. She had heard enough. "Are we going away?" Annie asked. Her voice was steady, but her eyes were not. Marcus's face changed fast. The hard rancher look fell apart, and what showed underneath was a father who did not know how to promise safety. "No," he said quickly, "you are not going anywhere." Annie came down one step at a time. "Ben is asleep," she whispered. "If we go away, will he wake up and not find you?" Marcus took a step toward her, then stopped like he did not know if he was allowed to hold her fear. Emily did not wait. She crossed the space and knelt beside Annie. "Listen to me," Emily said, keeping her voice calm. "No one is taking you tonight. You are safe in this house right now." Annie's chin trembled once. "But later." Emily looked up at Marcus. "We will not let that happen." Marcus stared at her, as if she had spoken something he had not allowed himself to believe. Mrs. Gable pointed toward the kitchen with her thumb. "Annie, go back to bed. I will sit outside Ben's door so he stays asleep. You do not need to carry grown folk trouble." Annie hesitated, then nodded. Before she turned, she looked at Emily again, like she was trying to hold on to her with her eyes. When Annie was gone, Marcus walked to the front room and stared into the dying fire. His hands were at his sides, fists opening and closing. "I knew this would come," he said, almost to himself. "I just hoped it would not." Emily followed him into the parlor. The Christmas tree stood in the corner, the paper stars catching firelight. It looked too innocent for the kind of fight that was coming. "What will you do?" Emily asked. Marcus let out a slow breath. "I do not know. Helen has a big house. She has a husband. She has money. She can stand in front of a judge and look like the right answer." He turned his head slightly. "And I am a man who has been half dead since Mary left." Quote. Emily heard the pain under his words, and she also heard the danger. He was already losing the fight in his own mind. "You are their father," she said. Marcus's eyes stayed on the fire. "Sometimes I think they deserve better than me." Emily's voice sharpened without meaning to. "No, they deserve you alive, not perfect. They deserve you here." Marcus finally looked at her. "And you deserve to stay out of this." Emily held his gaze. "I did not ask for trouble, but I will not pretend I did not hear that child's voice." Marcus's throat moved as he swallowed. "Helen will use you against me. She will say you are an unmarried woman in my home. She will say it proves I have poor judgment." Emily felt a sting of fear, because she knew the town would talk. She knew how easily kindness turned into rumor. But then she remembered Ben's head resting against her arm, trusting her without question. "She can say what she wants," Emily said. "I know what I am. I am a teacher. I am decent. And I care about those children." Marcus shook his head once, like he was trying to shake off hope before it could hurt him again. "Caring does not win in court." "Then we bring the truth," Emily said. "We bring people who know you, people who know the children. We bring proof they are safe and loved." Marcus looked away. Loved. Emily stepped closer, keeping her voice soft again. "You love them. You just do not know how to show it every moment. That can change." Before Marcus could answer, there was a knock at the front door, not the friendly kind. It was firm and official. Marcus froze for one heartbeat, then crossed the room and opened it. A deputy stood on the porch with snow on his shoulders and a stiff look in his eyes. He held papers in one hand. "Marcus Thorne?" the deputy asked. Marcus did not move aside. "That's me." "You've been served," the deputy said, holding out the papers. "County court order. You're to appear in Silver Pine in 10 days, and you're to bring the children." Marcus took the papers, his hands steady even as his face went tight. The deputy's eyes flicked past him, toward the warm light inside, toward Emily standing in the parlor. His mouth twitched like he was already storing the story to tell someone else. "I'd advise you not to be late," the deputy said. "Judge does not like excuses." Then he turned and walked back into the snow, leaving boot prints on the porch boards like a warning. Marcus shut the door slowly. For a moment he just stood there, papers in his hand, breathing through his nose like he was trying to stay in control. Emily could hear the house settling, the wind outside, the far-off creak of the barn in the cold. Then a small voice came from the hallway. Ben stood there, rubbing his eyes, his blanket dragging behind him. "Papa," he said sleepily, "why is there a stranger?" Marcus's face broke open, just for a second. He crossed the room and lifted Ben into his arms, holding him tight like he was afraid someone could take him in that exact moment. "Go back to bed," Marcus said, voice rough. "You're safe." Ben's arms wrapped around his father's neck. "Is Miss Carter staying?" Marcus looked over Ben's head at Emily. His eyes were full of fear and something else, something desperate. Emily stepped forward. She did not touch Marcus, but she stood close enough to let him feel he was not alone. "For now," Emily said to Ben, "yes, I am here." Ben's head dropped onto Marcus's shoulder, already drifting back toward sleep. Marcus carried him down the hall, slow and careful, like he was carrying the last thing he had left in the world. Emily stayed by the tree, staring at the papers on the table, hearing the unspoken truth in the air. 10 days was not much time. And if she did nothing, Annie and Ben would be taken from the only home they had ever known, and Marcus Thorne would lose the last pieces of his heart, right after he had started to feel them beating again. The courthouse in Silver Pine was small, cold, and packed tight. Wet coats steamed near the door. Boots stamped snow onto the floorboards. People filled every bench, not because they loved court, but because this fight had become the town's Christmas talk. Marcus sat near the front with Annie beside him, and Ben on his knee. Ben held Marcus's coat like it could keep him from being taken away. Emily sat one row behind, hands folded, back straight, trying not to show how hard her heart was pounding. Mrs. Gable sat to Emily's left like a guard dog ready to bite. Across the room, Helen Bennett looked like she belonged in a different world. Her coat was fine, her gloves were clean, and her smile was sharp. Her husband sat beside her, stiff and silent. Walter Pierce sat in front of them with papers stacked like a wall. When the judge entered, the room stood. Judge Redding was old, with tired eyes that had seen too many families break apart. He sat, looked over the room, and spoke in a plain voice. "This is about 2 children," he said. "Not pride, not anger, not gossip. Sit down." Walter Pierce stood first. He spoke smooth and calm, like he was selling something. He said Marcus was often away. He said a widower's home could not give children what they needed. He said Helen offered stability, money, and a proper household. He said the ranch was lonely. He said the father was distant. He said the children would be better off. Then he turned his eyes toward Emily and let his voice change just enough for the whole room to feel it. "And there is also the matter of Miss Emily Carter," Pierce said. "An unmarried woman living in the home, a situation that invites talk and shows poor judgment." A low murmur moved through the benches. Emily felt heat rise in her face, but she did not look down. Judge Redding lifted a hand. The murmur died. "Talk is not proof," the judge said. "Proceed." Pierce called 2 witnesses, both men from town who did not know Marcus well. They spoke about seeing Marcus ride hard and keep to himself. They said the Thorne house felt cold. They said the children seemed quiet. They did not say Marcus was cruel. They only said he was not warm. Then Pierce sat down with a small, satisfied look, like he had done enough. Helen stood next. She did not cry. She did not raise her voice. She spoke like a woman certain she was right. "My sister Mary deserved more than a hard life on the plains," she said. "And these children deserve more than a house filled with grief. I can give them comfort and a mother's care. Marcus has refused to move forward. He keeps everything the same, like the children are meant to live in the shadow of death." Marcus's face went tight, but he did not interrupt. Annie's hands clenched in her lap. Ben's eyes looked watery. When Helen finished, she glanced toward Emily as if to remind her that she was only a tool in this fight. Judge Redding nodded once. "Now I will hear the other side." Marcus stood. At first his voice was low. "I work," he said. "I keep the ranch going because it feeds my children. I have made mistakes. I have been quiet. I have been lost since Mary died." He swallowed, and the room stayed still. "But I have never stopped loving my children. I have never stopped being their father." Pierce rose. "Love is not enough," he said quickly. Marcus did not look at him. He looked at the judge. "Love is not all I have," Marcus said. "I have a home. I have a good woman who has cared for my house for years. I have neighbors who know what kind of man I am. And I have something else." He nodded toward Mrs. Gable. Mrs. Gable stood and walked forward like she owned the room. She did not bow to Helen. She did not soften her words for court. "I knew Mary Thorne," Mrs. Gable said. "I knew her better than her sister did, because I was the one in that house when the fever came." Helen Bennett did not show her face. She did not hold Mary's hand. She did not wash Mary's brow. She did not sit with those children when they cried. Quote, Helen's mouth tightened. Pierce started to object, but the judge held up his hand. "Let her speak," Judge Redding said. Mrs. Gable turned slightly toward the judge. "Mary loved this ranch. She loved her husband. She loved her children. And she wrote down what she wanted, because she knew trouble would come." Marcus stepped forward and held out Mary's letter. His hand trembled, but he kept it steady. Judge Redding took the paper carefully, like it mattered. The room went so quiet that Emily could hear the soft crackle of the stove in the corner. The judge read for a long time. His face did not change much, but his eyes grew heavy. When he finished, he set the letter down and looked straight at Helen. "This letter is clear," he said. Mary Thorne wanted her children raised by their father on the ranch. She wrote that her sister should help if she could, not take. He paused. She also wrote that Marcus Thorne is a good man, even when grief makes him quiet. Helen's face went pale. That letter could be written under pressure, she said sharply. Mrs. Gable's voice snapped. Mary was not a woman who could be pressured. Judge Redding looked at Pierce. Do you have proof the letter is false? Pierce's mouth opened, then closed. No, Your Honor. Judge Redding nodded once. Then we move on. The pastor from town stood next and spoke about Marcus bringing food to families during hard winters. Mr. Harper from the general store spoke about Marcus paying debts for widows who could not. Mrs. Mills spoke with shaking hands about Marcus finding her son in a snowstorm and carrying him home on his own horse. Then Judge Redding looked at Emily. Miss Carter, he said, you are part of this case because your name has been used. Come forward. Emily stood and walked to the front. She felt every eye on her, some kind, some curious, some sharp. She kept her chin up. What is your role in this home? The judge asked. Emily answered plainly. I am the children's teacher. I was invited for Christmas dinner. After that, Mr. Thorne asked if I would consider living at the ranch to teach Annie and Ben and to help give the home warmth again. Pierce stood. And you accepted? Emily met his eyes without fear. I have not accepted a contract, she said. I have accepted that the children need care and that they trust me. Pierce's voice turned sweeter, which made it uglier. Do you deny that people in town are talking? Emily did not flinch. People talk when they are bored. They talk when they do not understand. They talk when they want to feel important. She looked at the judge again. But children do not belong to gossip. They belong to the people who love them and keep them safe. Judge Redding nodded slowly. That is true. Then the judge looked at Annie. Miss Thorne, he said, I will not force you to speak, but I will listen if you choose. Annie stood. Her hands shook, but her voice came out clear. My father is not mean, she said. He is sad. He works hard. He reads to us sometimes, and he forgets to smile, but he tries. Miss Carter makes the house feel warm. Mrs. Gable keeps us safe. Annie swallowed. Aunt Helen never came when Mama died. She doesn't know us. She just wants us. Quote, a sharp sound came from Helen, half anger and half shame. Pierce moved to stop it, but it was too late. The town had heard Annie. Then Ben slid off Marcus's knee and stood too, small and stubborn. I want my papa, Ben said, and I want Miss Carter too. The room made a soft sound, like a breath shared by many people at once. Judge Redding leaned back in his chair and stared at the wood ceiling for a moment, like he was asking God for patience. Then he looked down again, eyes steady. This court will not take children from a loving father because grief made him quiet, he said. Annie and Ben Thorne will remain with Marcus Thorne on the ranch. Ben let out a small sob and clung to Marcus's leg. Annie's shoulders dropped like she had been holding them up for years. Judge Redding lifted a finger. However, he said, this court also sees that these children need a steady home. Marcus Thorne, you will provide it. You will continue to keep a responsible woman in the house, and you will show this court you are not hiding from life. His eyes moved to Emily. Miss Carter, if you choose to work for this family, it must be with respect and clear purpose. Do you understand? Emily's voice was soft but firm. Yes, Your Honor. Helen stood stiff and cold, her pride wounded deeper than the loss. Pierce gathered his papers fast, already planning how to leave town without looking like he had failed. When the hearing ended, the courthouse doors opened and winter air rushed in. People stepped aside to let Marcus and the children pass. A few men nodded at Marcus with a new kind of respect. A few women smiled at Emily like they had decided something. Outside, Annie took Emily's hand without asking. Ben grabbed her other hand. Marcus stood there for a moment, staring at the bright snow and the wide sky, like he could not believe the world had not collapsed. I thought I was going to lose them, Marcus said quietly. Emily looked at him. You almost did, she said. Not because of Helen, because grief was pulling you away from your own life. Marcus's jaw tightened, then eased. You're right, he admitted. They rode back to the ranch in silence, but it was a different silence now. It was not fear. It was the kind of quiet that comes after a storm passes and the ground still shakes a little. When they arrived, Mrs. Gable was waiting on the porch with her arms crossed. She tried to look strict, but her eyes were bright. "Well?" she demanded. Ben shouted first. "We're staying!" Mrs. Gable let out a breath like she had been holding it since Mary died. "Good," she said. "Now get inside before you freeze." That night, Marcus stood in the parlor by the tree. The paper stars swayed slightly as the fire warmed the room. Annie and Ben sat on the rug with new energy, like they were allowed to be children again. Marcus turned to Emily and held out a small set of keys. His hand did not shake this time. "I said I wanted you to be part of this household," he said. "I meant it." He placed the keys in her palm. "This is your home too if you want it. Not for a season, not for court, for real." Emily stared at the keys. They felt heavy, like a promise. Mrs. Gable watched closely, then nodded once, satisfied. Emily's eyes stung. "I have never had a home that stayed," she whispered. Marcus's voice went rough. "Then let this be the one that stays." Annie crawled closer to Emily's side and leaned against her, quiet and brave. Ben climbed into Emily's lap like he had done it 100 times. Emily held them both and felt years of emptiness begin to fill with something warm and real. Marcus stepped closer. He did not rush. He did not make big speeches. He only said the truth in the plain way he lived. "I can't replace what we lost," he said. "But I can choose what we build now, and I want to build it with you." Emily looked up at him. In his eyes, she did not see a man asking for saving. She saw a man offering a place, a family, and a future. "Yes," she said, and the word came easy, like it had been waiting inside her for years. "I will stay." Later, when the children were asleep, Emily walked to the front window and lit the lamp, just like she did at the schoolhouse. The flame bloomed bright against the cold night, only this time the light was not for nobody. Marcus stood behind her, quiet as always, but no longer far away. Outside, the snow kept falling, soft and steady, covering old tracks and making room for new ones. If this story moved you, share it, leave a comment, and follow for more emotional Wild West stories.